Hello and welcome to this segment of MythoLogical presented by Breakfast at Cinema, in which we will take a look at some of Hindi cinema's many attempts to bring to the big screen stories we have grown up listening to and those we go back to time and again throughout our lives. Mythology has always influenced cinema deeply, with the various plot templates it provides, the fact that these stories are already popular with the masses, and the scope for presenting grandeur and divinity while exploring new filmmaking techniques. For this event, we are focusing on mythology in Hindi cinema with four landmark films, mythology's influence on them, and their legacies. Mainstream Hindi cinema was always attracted to mythological stories and trying to present them in grand and opulent ways with special effects. On the other hand, the parallel cinema movement, which concerned itself with problems endemic to the country, presented these very stories in new and stark light so that the nation could confront its essential character and make changes where it deemed necessary. This new kind of cinema also influenced Hindi films, bringing about a reinterpretation of mythologies in a modern and relevant context. The movement was led by a breed of filmmakers who were keen on making cinema which should reflect and expose our vulnerabilities and push us towards changing things for the better. In the turbulent political landscape of the 1970s, many of these films couldn't provide direct solutions to the problems plaguing our country, but they did fulfill their role in informing and making aware the audiences of what needed to change. The growth of parallel cinema in 1970s and 80s led to deep introspection of both personal and societal nature in cinema. At this time came a unique film called Kalyug, directed by Shyam Benegal, written by Girish Karnad and produced by Shashi Kapoor's production company Filmwalas. The film set the story of Mahabharat in contemporary Mumbai as a bitter feud between two related industrial families. The Pandavas portrayed by the Puranchand family and the Kauravas or the Khubchand family, both nurtured and led by a grand old man, mirror the epic in their actions, reactions, interrelationships, politics, ambitions, and the many unsavory secrets in their closets, which lead us to the point from where the film begins, which is the War of Kurukshetra. The story doesn't even feel forced. Fraternal fights over property are still common, as are the complex weaves of our traditional families. And it is also said that every clan in our country has its own Mahabharat happening, continuing and repeating smaller chapters from the original. In the case of Kalyug, the tensions between the Khubchand and Puranchand cousins have always existed. But as they begin to play dirty to score important government tenders for their respective companies, they begin to lose sight of everything else but the need to humiliate each other. The initial small insults hurled at each other keep adding up till they tip over the edge and all hell breaks loose. The film, the winner of Filmfare Best Film Award in that year and considered a rich, complex story with multi-layered characters, is a somewhat deep analysis of people driven sometimes by circumstances and sometimes by ego, but mostly for personal or family gain. It also subverts the idea of dharam and adharm, or righteousness and impiety, by asking the question of whether means justify the ends or if the ends justify the means, and the extent one would go to service dharma. The film captures the dilemma of a business family which would rather hold on to its secrets in the name of righteousness than help resolve the differences by bringing them out in the open and clarifying misjudgments and misconceptions. That is only because it would mean personal humiliation in each other's eyes. There is constant mention of nation building as one of the goals of both families that they're working towards, which leaves one wondering if a collaboration between the Pandavas and the Kauravas would have created a different template for us to emulate. At the core of their lack of cooperation with each other are questions about lineage, propriety, and greed that cannot be satisfied. The class struggle central to Mahabharat, where parentage defines one's status in society, is reflected in Kalyug, where Dhanraj or Duryodhan does not think that Dharamraj or Yudhishthir and his brothers deserve any part of the clan's business empire. He is aware they aren't his uncle's sons, which makes them illegitimate heirs in his eyes. However, Karan is also an orphan brought up by the patriarch Bhisham Chand. He is loyal and close friends with Dhanraj, also acting as the chief strategist in his growing business, which is constantly competing with Dharamraj's family business. Unaware of his own parentage, Dharamraj's youngest brother Bharatraj or Arjun has a false sense of righteousness and superiority. He is known to be in direct conflict with Karan most of the time. These undercurrents finally cause both families to implode, leaving only irreversible emotional scars and complete destruction of both families in the end, just like in Mahabharata. Kalyug begins roughly at the point the Kurukshetra war parallel has just broken out. An interesting aspect the film picks up from its source material is the mistrust between the two sets of cousins and the humiliation they are made to feel at the hand of the other. Dhanraj and Karan cause an income tax raid to happen at Dharamraj's home, during which Supriya or Draupadi feels disgraced by the officers fiddling with her very personal articles of clothing in her wardrobe. She calls out to her favorite brother-in-law Bharatraj to save her.
ये कोई सर्च करने का तरीका है? आपको कोई तमीज नहीं है?
काला पैसा भी तो आपने बड़ी तमीज से कमाया होगा।
भारत! भारत! ये लोग क्या तुम कुछ कर नहीं सकते?
Draupadi's role in Mahabharata continues to be debated and discussed among scholars even today. But in this reimagining, she seems to be searching for power and is a definite catalyst in the way Bharatraj feels so strongly antagonistic towards Dhanraj's clique, especially Karan. The film does cast Draupadi's role in grey and questions her ability to help the family beyond her limited focus.
अब बात हाथ से निकलती जा रही है। भवानी पांडे का ये आदमी तो मर गया। इसका इल्जाम हमारे सर पर ना आ जाए।
It is also revealed that Karan had proposed marriage to Supriya once upon a time but was rejected. We aren't explicitly told the reason why, but we know it is because Karan was an orphan. He is polite and civil towards her while being distant, even though he still holds a flame for her in his heart. But his presence always seems to make Supriya uncomfortable. This is just like Draupadi being attracted to Karna but rejecting him because he was an illegitimate child. She is also displeased when her brother Kishan Chand marries his daughter Subhadra to Bharatraj.
आइए, आपके बेटे घर पे आपका इंतजार कर रहे होंगे।
मेरा एक बेटा और भी है, सबसे बड़ा। भीष्म दादा से पूछो कौन है वो।
Her anxieties about aunt and niece marrying brothers in the same family is a definite threat to her position in the family and may seem valid to us. But all social awkwardness is shrugged off for the purposes of strengthening the kingdom, or in this case, the family's business empire. The only two primary characters who seem to have a conscience and are not driven by hunger for power are Karan and Balraj, who actually wish to improve the relationship between the two families, but have very well-defined loyalties. Though Karan is manipulative in business and makes low-bro moves, but only because of his loyalty to Dhanraj and the organization for which he works. He doesn't care about power, but acceptance and affection, just like Karna in Mahabharata.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
How's the drink?
Terrible. Terrible. तो हाथ मिलाएं। धनराज भाई से रिश्तेदारी है क्या?
दोस्ती।
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 In an early scene when Dhanraj insults Bharatraj about his illegitimacy, we see Karan wincing. Both the families are driven by a very strong sense of, if you're not with us, you're against us. Bharatraj's proposition to Karan at the beginning about joining the Khub Chands at double salary and his later hatred of him is fueled by the same thought. Karan's conscience doesn't permit him to cross certain lines, and so he offers his resignation to Dhanraj. Then, once again, we see an ego driven Dhanraj treating this act of righteousness as a rejection and reminds Karan of his illegitimacy. Almost as if in recognition of Karna's superior moral fiber, Kalyug shows explicitly the trickery that leads to his death, very similar to the original text. During a drive at sundown, his car gets a flat tire as planned by Bharadraj. As he kneels by the side of the road to replace it, he is vanquished. Balraj happens to cause Sandeep Raj's death, just like Bhim in Mahabharat kills Dushasana. Although in this movie it is unintentional, it does become a catalyst for the events that follow in both stories. Balraj, like Bhim, is easily angered, but essentially driven by love and kindness for his entire family. Balraj loses his son later in the film, who is a composite of all the Pandav sons. The only Pandav or Puranchand offspring who remains and will take over the reins is Parikshit, again, just like in Mahabharata. In both versions of the story, in the end, the winners are ultimately the losers. The Khubchand family has no brothers left, and the Puranchand family is devastated to learn they accidentally killed their own brother Karan, and that there are barely any heirs left. Dharamraj is now more inclined towards spirituality and has left the day-to-day business. The elders have left and retired to the mountains. The women of the family are disconnected from each other. In the closing shots, as the camera hovers over the skyline of Bombay, we are left wondering if we will ever rise above petty politics and social divides to make way for cooperation, collaboration, and mutual evolution and development. In the context of India's over-reliance on external assistance in the 1970s and 1980s, the film had a very relevant take on the country's stakeholders. Among other reinterpretations of our ancient texts are films like Ankur, Utsav, Hum Panch, Matrubhumi, Agni Varsha, and the very mainstream Hum Saath Saath Hain, and more recently, Rajniti.